It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, March 7th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is thinking if that was Scott Laughton's last game as a Flyer, that is not a good one to go out on.
Agreed.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. To keep up with our latest information and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials. And of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, we are going to get into some trade deadline news and what we think the Flyers should do today and what the Flyers will do today. Those are very different things.
Oh, yeah.
Plus, we're going to preview the back-to-back against the Seattle Kraken and the New Jersey Devils, who both made some moves ahead of the trade deadline. So we'll get into that as well. But man, what a brutal loss to the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, they wouldn't admit that they were out for blood after last game, but you can kind of tell they were. And we talked about having to contain that top line to some degree, and they were not able to do it on any level.
No, but like Scheifele just was like, whatever he wants to do, it's fine.
Did. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty remarkable, actually. And especially so on that Winnipeg power play, they were just like firing at will, passing at will.
Mm-hmm.
It was very difficult to watch. And I will say, given that the Flyers penalty kill used to be so good and would not have left guys open like that in the past, it was really hard to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching, Flyers get beaten to spots. I watched a play in the third period where Travis Sanheim was in the corner first and still lost the puck. Like they just, it was, mostly awful play. And I was looking for certain things and I just wasn't seeing them. And, now we're getting into a situation where in another, day, it's going to be back-to-back situation. So that's not great either.
Yeah, I think so. And, the whole game, I was like, is the Flyers defense this bad or is Winnipeg that good? Right. And we saw what the Flyers were able to accomplish the last time around against Winnipeg of really shutting them down through the neutral zone and doing all this stuff. And I think to me, that's the difference between a building team and an established team, where the established team just knows automatically how to make those adjustments.
Yeah.
And really shut down whatever strategy the team against them had the first go around. Like they're just not going to get beat twice.
No, I mean, they did a good job. They knew the Flyers would probably try and score that first goal, so they kept the puck away from them. Possession was a big thing. And
right.
So early on, the Flyers didn't have the puck for a while. And, then they get a few goals and then they, then they kind of changed the way they played again. They were kind of like, okay, now we'll do it this way. And so, yeah, they did a lot of film study. They made sure that they played their game and they didn't play the Flyers game. And that was a big difference.
Yeah. And the biggest difference I noticed is that, you look at where Winnipeg was able to get their shots, you look at the heat map, a big giant circle in front of Sam Ersson, right? Like Winnipeg was getting plenty of opportunities in front of the Flyers net. And you look at the heat map for the Flyers and the biggest number of shots came from the point.
Right.
Which is like, that's not how you're going to be successful against this team because Eric Comrie was able to see the shots, right?
Yeah, he was able to see him. He corralled him, did a good job. In the third period, the Flyers were finally getting some traffic in front of the net, but it took too long. I agree. I think the big thing with the Flyers was, and again, like Travis Konecny's at the point now where it's like, you know what? just put him on the top line. Stop with the third line stuff, because he's now trying to go like 1-on-3. He's trying to be Superman at times out there, and that doesn't work with him. We all know that doesn't work. So it's just like, put him on his regular line and let him just come out of it. I don't know how many times I'm going to say it, but I guess I'll keep saying it.
Yeah, I think he does much better when he's on the rush coming at it from the side.
Yes.
If he's coming down the middle, he's going to get stripped of the puck every time. And so I agree. I think that's the kind of line he needs to be on, where he's in a 2-on-1 rush coming down the side of the ice and passing it and then skating net front and maybe being the pest that he is, kind of in the slot, right?
Yeah, I think that is best. At least Matvei Michkov got a goal, and Lou Nolan was funny because he said,
I heard that.
Without a doubt this time, and that was fun. At least that gave Flyers fans something to watch, something to laugh about. So, in that regard, that was good.
Yeah, you could even hear that over the broadcast. So
Okay.
it was really funny to hear that. I think the other thing too is the kind of specter hanging over everything with the trade deadline. And on the broadcast, at least, there was a lot of mention of Scott Laughton in particular, and his legacy with the team. They showed a video of his first goal as a Philadelphia Flyer, which is against the Carolina Hurricanes. And ironically, I'm in Carolina right now. But first of all, he looked so young.
Oh, yeah.
But in addition to that, just I feel like, they had to act as though it was Scott Laughton's last game as a Flyer. But the fact that both he and Ristolainen were in the game, not surprising, but also so different from what other teams are doing at deadline.
Yeah, and I think that's because of the coach, but that's fine. Whatever, it worked out. At least they didn't get injured. Yeah, with Scott Laughton, he has a great legacy. If this was his last game, fans love him. He's a team player. He's worked through a fair amount of coaches. He's played Flyers hockey the way you'd want to. At the very beginning, when he first got in the league, his skating wasn't very good. He worked on that a ton. He's not a pretty skater, but now he gets from A to B much better. Like, he's really, worked on becoming a good player, and he's a good player. He's a good, effective player.
Yeah, he really is. And just the contributions he's made on and off the ice. He's just such
tremendous.
Yeah, just a huge asset to the team in terms of community relations. The fact that he was the lead guy on the Hockey is for Everyone and Pride Nights, and he stepped forward and did that of his own volition. It wasn't like something that he had to do. He wanted to do this, and it was important to him. I think it's fantastic. And the fact that he was drafted by the Flyers, he's been a Flyer his entire career. It's just so much different than the Ristolainen situation, where Scott Laughton to me is a Flyer and will always be a Flyer. Rasmus Ristolainen is a Buffalo Sabre in my head still.
Right. I mean, he's been a good teammate. He's played.
Oh yeah.
Well. He changed his game for Torts and the team, and it's helped him in his career. He's had some growth here, because when he left Buffalo, people were just killing him there because, he wasn't good on the power play and he was having turnovers. He's not really a power play guy, but they've been showcasing him, and that's fine. But his game is good. He's a solid defenseman. You can count on him. His outlet passes are good. And so, yeah, he's a guy that, if he's not there, if he gets traded, he would be missed. And I think he's missed in the locker room, but it's not like he's Scott Laughton. There's a big difference in stature in the locker room.
Yeah, it is interesting because on, other shows and other times, and I will say it again, in that I feel like Scott Laughton is ultimately on the ice more replaceable than Rasmus Ristolainen is.
Yeah.
But is he though? That's where I
get into the emotional aspect and what he means in the room, then that kind of levels it out. It does.
Right. And it really does. And so, I'm kind of in denial, much in the same way that I was in denial about Claude Giroux.
Right.
Very different circumstances. And I think they did their best to kind of celebrate Scott Laughton. I mean, obviously it's not the same as Claude Giroux. We get that. But in terms of the impact and,
Yeah.
the level of player we're talking about here. But also, we had this irony of Claude Giroux's 1,000th NHL game at the deadline.
Yep.
And so there was a huge celebration of him. And there just like wasn't something like that for Scott Laughton. And they did their best, but it was still like, I don't know. I just don't feel like it was enough in some ways.
No, and the coach didn't feel like celebrating. He looked miserable on the bench. So, it's just one of those things.
Yeah. Right. Like when you lose a game like that in these circumstances, it just makes it really difficult. But
I think the picture was the celebration. Like that was his teammates saying, "Yeah, you want to do this? Let's do this. It'll be fun. It's a memory. We'll always have this memory." I think that's the celebration.
yeah, I would hope so. And I certainly will never forget that. But at any rate, there's more trade deadline activity to discuss, and we'll get into what the Flyers should be doing leading up to 3 p.m. today.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get it other than FanDuel, America's number one sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action, and if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance, plus the app's easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports book betting partner of the NBA.
On Monday's show, we will, of course, recap the Flyers games against the Kraken and the Devils. We'll have our nemesis of the week as well as the aftermath of the trade deadline. And if the Flyers make significant moves, we will have a bonus episode this afternoon to cover that. So stay tuned to our YouTube feed and your audio feeds as well. Now, looking at some of the deals that were made on Wednesday after we recorded, I think it was a very slow 24 hours overall. And then some things kicked into gear. We're going to talk about the deal the Kraken made when we preview that game
Right.
in the next segment, because that was a big one.
Yep.
For sure. There was a few smaller deals, but Pittsburgh did make some moves. One deal with the Preds, one deal with San Jose, where they basically sent Desharnais and Bunting out of town. And in return, they got Novak, Luke Shen, and a 2028 fifth. That's how everything came out in the wash so far as of what we know now for them.
Right. So, the fifth, who cares? Like, it's 2028. Like,
Right.
Doesn't matter. It's just to balance it. Novak is the jewel of this deal so far because he could play possibly a 3C, definitely a 4C. He's got a really good salary at I think the cap hits like 2.8, 2.9, something like that. He's good on faceoffs. He's good at winning puck battles. He has a little bit of a scoring touch. And so you got him for another year, and then, then he's a UFA. So that's good. They have some term on him. And then you kind of wonder, Luke Shen is going to be the window into what the Penguins are going to do next year. If they flip him, then we know that they're going to do more than a retool. If they keep him, then we know they're just retooling again and doing the same old, and giving him a contract. And because that's the thing, I think either Dubas got him to flip him or give him a contract, one or the other. And I don't know which one it's going to be.
Yeah, it's really interesting what he is doing over there. We talked about it when we had the home and home, that the Pens are kind of a mystery right now as far as that goes, in terms of, are they going to continue one more year at least trying to build around the core that they have, or are they really going to let it go and do a proper rebuild? So I think that is definitely something to keep an eye on.
Oh, and one last thing. Sorry. The Novak thing, as it pertains to the Flyers, they could look for a center like this too, with a year left, who's an RFA, not Kirby Dach, because he's got a second knee injury to the same knee, but somebody like that. That could be how they get a center. I wanted to just mention that.
Yeah, they absolutely could. I think that's fair. Uh, Jordan Greenway resigned in Buffalo, and Utah resigned a couple of guys. Utah's been re-signing a lot of guys. I think it's really interesting that they're retaining the talent they have and that they want that particular talent moving forward.
Right. I mean, Greenway is a big overpay. Flyers fans should not look
Right.
at that as a comp for anything because it was just that's a comp
No.
to keep a guy in town because they're having trouble keeping any kind of talent. That's what that is. As far as like Vemelka, it's probably still a bargain. And the fact
Yeah.
that he wants to be there, like, because this is a guy who just straddles the line of being a one. Some days he's a one, some days he's not, right? But for that salary, I take it.
Yeah, I think so too. So they're setting themselves up for the future
Yes.
really, really well in Utah right now. Now, as for the Flyers, as of right now, they have not made any moves. So, given we've got the 3 p.m. deadline today, what should the Flyers be doing today?
Yeah, you got to work the phones. I mean, Winnipeg's in house and they've been in house. So my feeling is if they were going to have a deal for Scott Laughton, do it before the game ends so he could plan everything and leave with the team. Like that would be a great way to do it. If not, having to hook up again with Winnipeg on the road would be difficult for Scott. Now, I'm not saying you should make a trade that always helps a player, but he's done a lot for the Flyers. And if they know there's a very good chance they're going to trade him to that team, they can make the transition a lot easier for him, provided they get their price. But that's just a thought. But
So you're suggesting that if Scott Laughton gets traded, it would be to Winnipeg.
I think that's the most likely choice. I know there's all this Toronto smoke, but I think Winnipeg probably is the most likely choice in my mind. Yes.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's something that is sort of a long time coming in terms of him getting traded. We'll see how that goes down, but I do think that finding the best available deal for Ristolainen and Lawton, and then pulling the trigger. If you don't love both of those deals, pull the trigger on one of them and just
Correct.
do it. I think you have to at some point have a compromise here, and I would suggest that you compromise on one of them and not both of them, and just keep the other one. I think that's the best approach here, given everything. I would lean toward keeping Ristolainen just because I think he's a good bridge defenseman to have at the moment on the team if you want to improve next year. I think he's a really great asset to have in house. And I think ultimately, as much as I love him to the ends of the earth, Scott Laughton is a lot more replaceable. So that's kind of where I look here. But ultimately, the Flyers have to do something to create more space in the cap, and they have to do something to create roster spaces for the up and coming prospects.
Right. So, and if they do keep Risto, which I'm okay with, I think your thinking on that is sound. Then you have to trade Yegor Zamula. You got to
Right.
get him out of town to create that roster space. You get what you can get for him. He is an NHL defenseman. You should be able to get either a lower level prospect or a second or a third, a conditional second or a third, depending on what type of team he goes to, if it's a playoff team. But I'm sure there's a market for him, but he may be a last minute thing. Like that may be
Right.
one that pops in at like 4:15 after the deadline's over because they had a phone call earlier and somebody didn't hit send on the text. Like it could be one of those.
Right. Yeah. Now, let's compare that to what they will do today and try and look into the brain of Danny Briere.
Well, I think what will they do? If I'm going to give odds on that, I'm going to say it's nothing. And they're going to say they tried and nothing got done. And if the nothing part happens, then I'll know just how much influence John Tortorella has on these kinds of decisions because he hasn't thrown in the white flag yet. He should have, but he hasn't. And I think that's complicating what Danny Briere can do because he has to go up to John. And like you have always said the last couple of shows, hey, I got the best deal possible. So you can't really, fault me on this. But if he just trades him and doesn't get the best deal possible, he's going to have an annoyed John Tortorella for, the next whatever amount of games, and that's disruptive too. So I think there's a better chance of nothing happening than something, but something still could happen.
Yeah, there could be, again, one of those smaller deals. I mean,
Yes.
I would not be shocked if Eric Johnson gets traded
Right.
last minute as
Right.
opposed to Zamula, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think that that will definitely happen. And unless some sort of crazy blockbuster deal happens, that's like a big 3-team deal that involves Lawton and Ristolainen or one or the other of them, I just feel like Danny loves that kind of stuff, right? He loves making a splash, but doing it in a smart way.
Hmm.
And I feel like those 3-team deals are his kind of deal out there. Just, he likes being a little coy about it and then making a splash. So that would be my guess, is that unless it's some sort of like bigger deal, it's going to be something small at the end of the deadline. Like you said, I think
Yeah.
that would be my prediction.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I just think those 3-player deals, if it doesn't happen pretty quickly, you run out of time.
Oh, sure. Sure. But, we've got some time today.
Mhm.
So I think, we'll see how that goes. But in the meantime, the Flyers have 2 games to play this weekend against 2 teams that had some very big changes happen to them this week in the Seattle Kraken and New Jersey Devils. We are going to get into all of that coming up next. So the Flyers first faced the Seattle Kraken on Saturday, and the Kraken won the first matchup between the two teams way back in October, and things are very different now. And the Kraken have definitely thrown in the towel
Yeah.
here. They know who they are and what they are. They're in like second to last place in their division. And so they are doing their best to take advantage of the trade deadline here to build assets and cap space and all of that for the future. So they were part of a 3-team deal on Wednesday with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then the Detroit Red Wings were a pass through team here to retain some salary on Yanni Ward. So the Lightning get Bjorkstrand, they get Gord back, their old friend,
Yeah. I'm sure
and
Cooper asked for him.
yeah, and then an extraneous pick and Kyle Coin, and then the Kraken got Asamont and 2 first-round picks, which is the huge part of this. That
Insane.
was insane and incredible work by the Kraken here
Yeah.
because
Ron
so
Francis really outdid himself.
he did. So we got a 2026 and a 27. Now they're both top 10 protected, so they could slide
Sure.
into future years. But he worked out a deal. So if both picks slide, Seattle gets an additional third from Tampa each time the slide occurs.
Wow.
So that's like what a negotiation.
That's a
Super
great
impressive
that's
there.
yeah, I just chef's kiss on that. I mean, that's how you do it. That's how you
Yeah.
keep building assets. I know Kraken fans might be a little disappointed because this year kind of
Right.
fizzled, but you're
Yeah.
getting good production out of Shane Wright, and you still have a fair amount of young talent for the future. So I still think the Kraken are in good shape.
I think so too, as far as building towards the
Yes.
future. And I'm sure it was a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow seeing what Vegas did and then
Yes,
them not being able to repeat that because it's very hard to do that,
it
right?
is.
So there is that, but it's a great fan base, a great team, and I think that they're going to be okay moving
Yeah, they'll
forward.
be fine.
I have no worries about that, but that does affect their lineup a lot. And so looking at past lines kind of doesn't matter.
No.
You got to throw it out the window there. They did play the Preds last night, but the game isn't over. So we don't know how that ended. But before that, like since the break, they lost a couple of games. They did win against the Canucks, but they are a team that without Bjorkstrand, without Gord, it's going to be tough for them to have like sustained pressure, I think.
I mean, to a degree. I was listening to one of their games the other day. They do still have a fast team with some quick strike ability. So, like guys like Illy Tolvanen had in that game got a breakaway. The top line's solid. I mean, there's no problem with the top line, and actually, I think they'll be solid with the first two. If they were to keep Shane Wright on the third line, he's still a threat too. So I think it's their fourth line that's mostly hurt here. But again, I think they'll move one of those guys up. Maybe Eberle moves up now to the second or third line, and they do something like that. And if they do that, they're still formidable. There's enough guys here that can cause you problems. And so maybe they don't be as good a scoring team as they were before because of Bjorkstrand. I don't think Gord affects it that way. I think Gord affects it in other ways, those other intangibles,
Sure.
toughness and
Sure.
face-offs and things like that. But yeah, I still think they're dangerous, and their blue line is interesting because you have Gigantor and Alexiak who could skate,
Right.
and kill you
Right.
if he wants to. Larson blocks a ton of shots, so and Montour's really good, and I like Riker Evans. I always have. I think their blue line's still really good,
Oh yeah, that is for
and they
sure.
can get points from there possibly.
Right. And, I think obviously they've struggled across the board here. And so they aren't really necessarily good at any specialty thing. Like their power play is only like a hair better than the Flyers, which says a lot.
Yeah.
But, I think that, the Flyers do have a really good shot here at winning this
Yes.
game. It's at home. And I think it would do them very good to try and just tamper that down on, from what Seattle can do. It's a very important game also because it is the first half of a back to back, and you want to
Right.
get that first one as a win because you'll have some tired legs for that second game, which is against the New Jersey Devils. Now, their big news, not trade related, although it may lead to a trade, is the season ending injury to Jack Hughes. He had shoulder surgery done and he's officially out until next season. And, they're in a tough position because they've been struggling over the last month or so, I would say. And there's a significant chance that they're going to drop out of that top three in the division. And, there's talk of are they in on Brock Nelson? Is Kyle Palmieri going to come back? Maybe they'll go after Brock Besser. Like they have opportunities to try and shore themselves up with the loss of Hughes, but I think this is a bigger problem than just losing Jack Hughes, in my opinion.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a big engine. And Dougie Hamilton's out too. And
Right.
so that's almost as big just because he's an engine on their blue line. So, yes, they're going to be a different team. I imagine they're going to play differently than what we've seen the Devils before. This is an opportunity for the Flyers to kind of like jump on them offensively early and test their mettle and see what kind of offense they have. I think they're gonna go heavy for Brock Nelson. I know there's people out there that don't think that Lou Lamoriello would trade with his old team, but I disagree. I think he would, and I think that I have to say this just as an aside. Shannon Hogan did an amazing job with Brock Nelson on a post game interview. The ones that kind of ring through the arena, maybe one of the best
Yeah.
I've ever seen because they were both really emotional, and you could tell that was probably it for Brock Nelson, 99%. So yeah, if he were to go to the Devils, it would fix him, but not for this game, Rachel.
So while they lost Jack Hughes, the Devils did acquire not a forward, but a defenseman yesterday in Brian Dumoulin from Anaheim in exchange for a prospect and a conditional 2025 second round pick. So the return was kind of light, I would say, for Dumoulin, but
I don't know about that. I watched Trapp in the World Juniors, and I thought he has a little something to his game. He's got size and he's got decent hands. So we'll see. He could be a later developing player. He's only 19, so it might work out in the end. But yeah, Dumoulin's a bellwether playoff defenseman,
yes.
and they need that to solidify the defense because they're a defense first team with Sheldon Keefe, so that's a big deal. They're still looking for a center though.
Yeah, they absolutely need one, but I think Dumoulin will help mitigate the Hamilton situation at least temporarily, and we'll see what happens from there. Now, what we want from the Flyers is what we saw in the first two games against the Devils this season, and not the last one. The last one was that awful 5-0
Yes.
shutout in New Jersey. I was there; it was brutal.
Yeah.
We do not want to see that ever again. But I do think what we saw from the Flyers against the Devils in those previous games was exactly what you're talking about. You know, they were really strong in the neutral zone. They had really strong puck possession, the Flyers did.
Yeah.
And, were able to get very good offensive pushes because they were able to get around what the Devils' defensive structure is and get good shots. So I think if they can return to that and clog up the neutral zone for the Devils' rushes, I think they'll be in better shape than they were in that game. That's for
Now,
sure.
the bugaboo here is Heischer's healthy now. And so I know they played one of those games with Heischer being out. And he
Right.
does make a difference on faceoffs. Like we've talked about faceoffs a lot, and that'll be a factor. Cates against Heischer is not a great matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it'll be a very important back-to-back for the
Yes.
Flyers following the trade deadline as all teams try and resettle after everything is said and done. So we shall see how all of that comes out in
And
the
it's that
watch.
Saturday day game against the Kraken that those day games
Mhm.
you worry about.
Yeah, to some degree, I guess we do, and they're both day games. So, you
That's
know,
true. That makes it a little
anything,
better, I guess.
yeah,
I don't
anything
know.
can
I don't know.
happen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll be back on Monday to recap both of those games. Again, talk more about the trade deadline aftermath and name our nemesis of the week. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you've got mailbag questions or Flyers thoughts or a prospect you want us to talk about, let us know at Locked On Flyers on any of our socials. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, check out Locked On NHL, bringing you daily league-wide stories that matter with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.